Well, I'm so delighted that I'm here today with Shannon Harvey, who is a filmmaker, award-winning director of two internationally acclaimed films, documentaries. One's called The Connection, Mind Your Body, and My Year of Living Mindfully, which is just being released. Shannon's a journalist by background and wrote a book called The Whole Health Life about really kind of finding a way to wellness after a diagnosis of an autoimmune disease. So Shannon's been on a big journey, a huge journey, I would say, and through her own illness, becoming a mother, busy life relationships, and as we do when we journey through these things, we're searching for the things that are going to help us the most. And I think you find a lot of, we have a lot of false starts along the way, a lot of go down rabbit holes that don't go anywhere. And it's quite a journey for a lot of people. So that process of searching took Shannon to look into mindfulness, but not just pick up the app and have a look around and get into it and hopefully it works. I think the journalist in Shannon really wanted to get right into the science behind mindfulness and what it does to the human body and brain and the human experience. And so My Year of Living Mindfully as an experiment was born, and Shannon's documented that year so beautifully and so powerfully with the various experts all around the globe that you were able to talk to. So it is my huge pleasure to be here with Shannon today to have a conversation with her, a bit of a Q&A post the screening, and just ask a few questions that I'm sure all of our viewers and audience would love to know and hear from you. So thank you so much for being here, Shannon.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Mm-hmm. So we might kick off with just a little bit of context, I guess. So I think when we first started speaking about the film, it was pre-pandemic. And, I think for a lot of people, there's this line now drawn in our lives of pre-corona, post-corona. So with that in mind and the situation we've all found ourselves in with lockdown, social isolation, really life not being what it used to be, and the mental health impact that's had on so many people and may still actually be yet to have on so many other people. I think I know for myself, it was kind of everything sort of a bit novel at first and exciting and, we're locked down, great, we can slow life down. But I think as the economic fallout begins to become more apparent and that isolation still from family and friends that you can't really see yet, we're starting to change. But I think it now might be the time more than ever where people are going to really potentially struggle at times. So it's lovely to have this conversation now, because I think it's actually also going to be incredibly poignant and useful and timely for people for where we're at in our global crisis right now. So tell us, just in a nutshell, really, obviously the film explains it, but from you, why a documentary, why a film, and why the topic of mindfulness?
So I'm a journalist, as you know, and I'm really dedicated to bringing attention to evidence-based approaches to helping people live better, with a particular focus on people who are looking for answers to deal with chronic illnesses. So my first film, The Connection, explores the evidence underpinning the connection between our mind, body and health. And it's really a kind of an essay outlining what was then the latest evidence, demonstrating that when it comes to the chronic disease epidemic, we really need to take a whole person approach if we actually want to turn that ship around. So that was kind of the beginning for me of this filmmaking thing. And my follow-up film, My Year of Living Mindfully, is really kind of a natural extension to that. I started investigating what I could be doing and what I could be teaching my kids to protect and nurture and nourish their mind. And at the very beginning of the project, I was just stunned that there is no mental equivalent of a 30-minute jog around the block or eating our 5 fruit and vegetables a day. Something that's underpinned by evidence and recommended by experts, something that we can all do for ourselves regardless of our circumstances or our levels of education. So what is the equivalent of mental exercise or mental nourishment? And that's how I ended up with my year of living mindfully and the great experiment that unfolded.
Fantastic. And I guess, a lot of our audience out there will be familiar with mindfulness. A lot of probably practicing meditation daily. There's probably a spiritual element to their practice as well in a lot of cases. So it's an interesting question I think you've been asked before, and I'd love to ask it just at the outset for our audience. Why, in terms of the film, I think, a deliberate choice not to go down the path of, where I guess a lot of mindfulness practice begun in say, Buddhism or another spiritual tradition, why that wasn't necessarily part of the film. Love to talk about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question, especially because there are a lot of really dedicated mindfulness practitioners who have come through the Buddhism tradition to get there. It's simply because I'm a health journalist, and my roadmap through the very murky industry of wellness is science. And it still is, despite everything that was uncovered during my year of living mindfully. I still do place great value in science and evidence. Science is what brought us, cures for diseases, and science is what means that we have this wonderful thing that means we can get immunized from things that might kill us or the people around us. So I really value science, and so that was really my starting point for the story. Therefore, it kind of would have been a bit of a dogleg for me to spend huge amounts of time sort of going into the ancient underpinnings of mindfulness training. Having said that, there is a 40-minute sequence sitting on the cutting room floor where we do go right down into the depths of it. But I've just actually completed the book that's going to accompany the film and decided that the best way for me to actually fully explore that and my own lineage, so to speak, is through that long-form narrative storytelling. Yeah. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to that.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And when does the book come out?
Early September.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. We're waiting for that one. So tell me, Shannon, what of all the science you looked at, what was the most compelling piece of evidence for you that said, was it one thing, or was it, it was a combination of things that said, there is absolutely no doubt about this and we have to tell the world about this?
It was actually quite gradual for me, and it was very experiential, which was quite surprising. I thought at the beginning of the project that all the answers would be found in black and white objective data. And what's really interesting is that when I was setting up all the scientific tests and establishing the kind of protocol, I filled in the quality of life questionnaire, which was quite an extensive questionnaire, as an afterthought. It was like this last minute thing that I did right before I started meditating every day. I was like, I better just do this, but it's just, it's just subjective well-being. Who really cares about that? And by the end of the film, as you saw, the subjective well-being was actually so important in my own experience throughout the year. So that was a real shift and quite surprising. But it was gradual. It was like when my insomnia began to improve, I was like, And when I started having these moments where my training had gotten me to a point where I was actually able to intentionally kind of rest or wrestle my attention into my awareness rather than being caught up in my narratives. I had these kind of moments that were like enough to keep me meditating, and then ultimately that led to the silent retreat experience, which was the best thing I've done in my life apart from marrying Jules, my husband. And and then ultimately, yeah, the Middle East experience as well, where I realized that mindfulness can cross cultures, it can cross circumstances, and it can cross continents, and actually make a real difference. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. So I'm sure we all love to know, like, obviously you kind of shared quite personally some of your health issues, and how is that for you now? And certainly, I mean, making a film is no small feat, really, and it's incredibly taxing on you too, and the work you do and the passion you bring to it. So, and having a family. So, how how can you see what you're practicing, and the meditation mindfulness sort of playing out, and does it still improve your life and your experience of life, and or has it sort of just reached a plateau, or do you feel like you're still expanding and you're still reaping the benefits exponentially, I guess, rather than you've got there and now you're just going to hang there for a while?
You know, it's funny you say that. I think of it as training, and when it's framed as a training, simply as mental training, that's like asking somebody like, oh, now that you've been to the gym every day for 6 months, do you feel like you've got where you wanted to be? You know, and it's like, well, maybe, but there's still so much to explore for a start. But then if you stopped, you know, your fitness wouldn't be maintained. So I do really think of it for me experientially as mental fitness training, and it's certainly dose dependent for me. So I've been able to track a really obvious change from I started with an app, just doing 20 minutes a day. And then when I went up to 45 minutes a day, it was like a monumental difference in my day-to-day awareness and my kind of clarity of mind. And then when I went to the silent retreat, it was like that was amplified. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the next question everyone will have is, which app did you start with?
Yeah. So I began using Dan Harris's app, which is called 10% Happier. And no, just called 10% now. It was 10% Happier when I began, and they've rebranded to 10%. And that was great because it's got many of the East Coast American mindfulness teachers who've all written books and are quite renowned for bringing mindfulness to the West, doing the teaching. And that was a really good starting point. I graduated up to Judson Brewer's app, which is called Unwinding Anxiety, which was really interesting because he's a doctor researcher, so an MD, PhD, doing really, really interesting work with mindfulness and treating anxiety, as well as mindfulness and treating eating disorders, as well as mindfulness for quitting smoking. And he's delivering that all in app-based programs. And that was really interesting, actually, doing the Unwinding Anxiety app. You would have seen Judson featured in the film. And then after that, I graduated up to MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And that was really transformational because that was delivered in group with a face-to-face teacher and a really experienced teacher named Timothea Goddard, who is also a psychotherapist. And she's been teaching mindfulness for a very long time and running groups for a very long time. So her wisdom was quite palpable. And practicing in a group setting as well was really game-changing. And that also coincided, because MBSR is quite demanding, that's what coincided with the jump up to 45 minutes a day. So by the time I got ready for the silent retreat, I felt like I'd actually been training, you know, like a marathon. I felt like I'd actually been really preparing for it. Yeah.
And so how do you, just personally, I guess, kind of distinguish between, you know, obviously a lot of people say, well, running is my mindfulness, running is my meditation, or swimming is my meditation. For you, what is the difference when you say it's about mental training, you know, and just like you need to train your body to stay fit, it's your mind. What's the difference? And for you, do you kind of practice it as a as a way to set your day up, or is it something to sort of really wind down the day with and close out the day and kind of move into another phase of the day?
So there's two parts to that question. The first question is, can running or swimming or golfing or scuba diving be my mindfulness practice? The answer is yes and no, of course. So I had a really interesting conversation with Gary Maddox, who's a journalist with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, and he's just recently been through a horrendous melanoma experience and stage 4 melanoma, pretty aggressive, pretty serious situation. And he swam every day, and he was formerly a triathlete, I think. So he really needed to, I imagine, keep his fitness training. And he asked me, was his really dedicated swimming practice mindfulness? And my answer to that was, it could have been, but it could also not have been. So before I started my year of living mindfully, I really enjoy yoga and I practice yoga regularly. But I think I could quite happily go through an entire yoga class and my mind was anywhere but being trained. Like, I was thinking about liking and disliking, about enjoying and not enjoying. Sometimes I'd be able to do an entire creative brief of, a film project in my mind, in a 90-minute yoga class, which is not mindfulness practice. That's mind wandering, right? So mindfulness is simply mind training. It's simply practicing awareness. Or I like to think of it, I sort of think that mindfulness is a really confusing word for a lot of people. And I think perhaps if they had have called it awareing, the practice of awareing, intentionally awareing, I think that may have helped a lot of people try to understand what it is. So that's the first part. That's my answer to the first part of your question. And as for what does my practice look like now, still aim for 45 minutes a day, which I know sounds like a lot, but I probably only actually achieve that about 2 or 3 days a week because I have young children who are still at a stage where they like to come in for cuddles in the morning, so that's really nice. And it's almost impossible to meditate with young children poking you in the eye. Although maybe some of the really advanced practitioners could keep, a state of pure awareness. So then I just meditate at my first, opportunity from there, whether it's my lunch break or sometimes I go right through to the end of my day until I've actually found the time. Yeah.
And how is your health through all of this, through the journey now? Is it still a kind of a fragile proposition every week, or is it you're much more kind of robust? And how's it impacted your physical being?
I'm really well right now. I feel great. I don't have any pain in my body, but my health is very fragile, and I know that when I let my regular healthy behaviors go, it's pretty quick with me. My health deteriorates pretty quickly. So it's not just my mindfulness training, it's also making sure I get enough sleep, making sure I eat the right foods, nurturing my relationships, getting up and moving from my desk, all of that.
Yeah. If other people were to kind of that aren't really don't have a practice at the moment, have been teetering around for almost maybe years, even thinking I really should do that mindfulness stuff. How would you recommend they get started? And even one step further, is there a way to, I guess, accelerate them on their journey so that they really, I guess, get that commitment to the practice and that taste for it, and almost feel the benefits of it quickly enough to know that this is something I really need in my life and I want to continue with? Is there a magic bullet, or is it just an individual journey for everyone?
It's very individual, of course. I had a really interesting conversation with Willoughby Britton, who's the researcher doing the very, very important work about the adverse events associated with mindfulness. So like anything that we do, we can go too far or we can do some harm with it for ourselves. So I think my first thing would be to make sure you find the practice that's the right fit. And for me, I spent a lot of time researching what app would be right for me, by asking other people and by sort of trying things and not liking things and then not sticking with them and then trying something different. So I think finding the right fit is really important. Finding the right teacher is really important. And just, the other element to this is I used an Odysseus contract, which is what behavior change researchers often talk about, which is where the version of me who wanted to meditate every day for a year didn't trust the future version of me to actually follow through on that commitment, because life's busy, and quite frankly for me, mindfulness training, especially in the beginning, was mostly unpleasant. So it was like, why, when there's, gorgeous Highlanders to look at on, streaming television, why would you actually sit with your uncomfortable mind at night? So I knew that I needed some kind of commitment contract or an Odysseus contract, which is probably why I went to the elaborate efforts of enlisting an entire team of scientists and spending $30,000, because if I didn't meditate, there would be no point in doing the experiment. But like an Odysseus contract doesn't have to be quite so complicated. Like AJ Jacobs, who's an American journalist whose work I just love, he wrote a wonderful book called Drop Dead Healthy, and in Drop Dead Healthy he writes that he was having trouble quitting eating sliced dried mango, and it was terribly unhealthy and full of sugar, but no matter what he did, he couldn't stop eating the mango. So he made an Odysseus contract, or a commitment contract, which was he wrote a $1,000 check to the American Nazi Party, and he said to his wife, who's a real hard ass, if I eat another dried mango slice, you have to mail this check.
Wow.
And it worked.
Whoa.
Yeah, it worked. It totally worked. So, and he emailed me to say that he has not eaten a dried mango slice since. Although he does have a problem with Starbucks macchiatos or double choc something or others. So, it's not entirely foolproof.
Oh my goodness. So with the resources that obviously you've discovered along the way in your research, is there somewhere where people can go, either through the film or outside of the film, to find, this is me, this is what I kind of dig and what I like and what the mode that I learn best through, or whatever, and this is, for you could find, you really get to know what it is that suited you. Is there some way you can go to suss that out for yourself to see which resource might be best suited to you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just about to put up on my website a free downloadable PDF about how I got started on my Year of Living Mindfully experiment. The other thing is that there are so many extraordinary evidence-based mindfulness centres in some of the world's most renowned universities. So I think that is a really excellent place to start. There's also a lot of really highly qualified teachers that have, been done certified training that are good places to start. But people can certainly go to our website, and there's, some links and various resources. Yeah.
And just so we can hear the link again.
So
My Year of Living Mindfully.
Yes. Yeah, so our website is www.myyearoflivingmindfully.com, and my website, where you'll find my blog, is just shannonharvey.com.
Fantastic. And tell us, just in terms of your own journey with your filmmaking at the moment. So where are you hoping this will take you, and what do you hope the impact of the film will be?
Wow, great question. We have more films planned, not about mindfulness, although perhaps maybe one about mindfulness with kids. But certainly, yeah, more films. There's so much more to explore in this amazing world of evidence-based health information that people can trust and people can rely on and people can feel inspired by. So Jules and I are both really dedicated to that. So watch this space. More to come. Yeah. Yeah.
And is there anything that, Shannon, that you'd love to share with people that you've kind of is a nugget, another nugget that's come since the film? So it's not in the film, but something you kind of, even through talking to people about the film, is there something that you'd like to share or just comment on before we say goodbye?
You know, it's like when I think about, one question that I'm often asked is what surprised me about my year of living mindfully. And there are probably, I can immediately think of 3 things that surprised me. There's probably 4, maybe 5. But immediately I think the first thing that surprised me was the mind the hype stuff. The fact that mindfulness is quite often oversold and overpromised, and people who have really, really good intentions, who are real mindfulness enthusiasts, might unknowingly be overselling what we do know about how the human mind works and what mindfulness can and can't do for who and in what circumstances. So that was really surprising to me. When that academic paper hit my inbox, it was like a bomb went off. I was just like, what? So that was surprising, just how far we've got to go in terms of this science. And it's just a constant reminder to myself as a journalist not to kind of let the story, I guess, outpace the evidence. So that's probably one surprising thing. I think the other surprising thing is that I don't think mindfulness actually makes me any happier. And I know that is a strange thing to say to people who might have read the titles of all the best-selling mindfulness books. Okay. But it's actually true. And like, you know, I could use the data, for example, the subjective wellbeing data, where I went from being just below average to being almost 100%, you know, almost at 100 on a quality of life subjective wellbeing scale. And I could say, yeah, look, I went from here to here and therefore I'm happier. So I know this is going to sound like it's kind of 2 sides of the same coin, but what I think my training does is it teaches me how to be content despite the fact that I might be suffering. And the word I use in the film is to be discomfortable. So comfortable despite my discomfort. And just to sit with unpleasant experiences. And it's something that I don't think I, as a young person, was taught how to do. Or perhaps if I was taught how to do it, it was in a really like fix it kind of way. Yeah. Like as in I might be experiencing pain or emotional difficulty or something. Quick, make myself better by...
How do we get rid of that?
Yeah, eating chocolate, buying something new, drinking another glass of wine, whatever it was that made me feel better. Booking another, you know, overseas trip when I was younger, you know, I know things aren't going so well in my life. Quick, go and save some, you know, some people in a third world country. That'll make the world better. You know, like, so fixing things. Whereas what my mindfulness training does is it just teaches me to be with that. And that is such a breakthrough for me. So it's like, it's not happier, it's more comfortable despite my discomfort. Yeah. Discomfortable.
I love it. I love a new word.
You wait, we'll get it in the dictionary.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for talking to me, and I know that the Talking Sticks community will love to hear these insights after seeing the film. And we're actually doing some work later on in the year when we're permitted to be in groups again with the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, and we're going to partner with them to run a mindfulness training here in Sydney. So that's exciting. If it appeals to anyone, make sure you stay tuned. Thank you again, Shannon, and congratulations on such a huge piece of work that is going to absolutely have an impact in the world, and on top of all the impact you've already created with all the amazing work you've been doing, and to share that. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for gathering people together and for providing a platform, for us to start meaningful conversations. So, right back at you.